That, and I'm grateful that he's here in my home today, and I'll turn the time now over to him.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm gonna box you up and take you with me everywhere. Thank you. I appreciate that so much, and thank you for being here. And I hope this is my third Cottage meeting today, and so I hope that my voice reaches that far and that you can hear me. And I want to thank every one of you for being here. I'm just so grateful. It never fails to sincerely humble me and just be amazed that there are so many good people who are out there that want to see a change in the country and the government and want to do the right thing. And so thank you. I look around and I'm telling you, a lot of new faces, a lot of people I haven't met yet. And so what I'd like to do is just take a few minutes and introduce myself, give you a little background on who I am and why I'm running for Congress. A lot of people ask, well, why are you running for the United States Congress? And I can sum up the reason very simply. Very simply. We stand on the precipice of being the first generation to hand to our children a less prosperous nation than the one we inherited. Now think about that for a second. We stand on the precipice of being the first generation to leave to our children a less prosperous nation than the one we inherited. And that is not okay with me. That's why I'm running for the United States Congress. I have 3 beautiful kids. I handed out a little flyer thing that shows my family on the front. I'm running to secure the blessings of liberty to them. And that's why I'm running. I've been in the legislature. I'm Carl Wimmer, of course, and thank you for having me, Cammie. Thank you so much. I've been in the legislature now for 5 years. I'm in my 3rd term. I just barely resigned so that I could have more time to hold meetings like this. Get out with the people. Get out into your homes, knock on your doors, and find out what concerns you, what issues are important to you. And that's what I want to make the next hour about. I just want to make this about you. Because this isn't about me. And really, it's not about any one individual here. It's about our nation. It's about our country. It's about what we can do to turn it around. And I want to make sure that when you leave here today, your questions are answered. But I want to back up a little bit. I've had the wonderful experience the last 5 years of being involved in as I look back, some of the most amazing legislation that you could really think of. And I want to talk a little bit about that. But I want to go back even before then. Before I even ran for office. You see, I grew up in a military family. My father served in the 82nd Airborne Division, and he had 5 boys, and we have 1 sister. Of the 5 boys, 3 of them are career Army, career military, and the other 2 of us went into law enforcement. My brother's a Tooele City captain, or lieutenant on the police force out there, and I've been involved in law enforcement my entire adult life. My parents instilled in us a love for God, family, and country that has been the guiding principles of my life. And I have to tell you, 5, 6 years ago, I was not very political. In fact, I was just working hard to make ends meet. I have a beautiful wife and wonderful little kids, and we had decided as parents it would be best if my wife were able to stay home and raise our family, and so I worked. But law enforcement, it's not the greatest salary, and I chose that career, but I knew that going in, so I had to work a lot of overtime and just to make ends meet and put food on the table. And so I really didn't have time for politics. In fact, 6 years ago, I wouldn't have been caught dead in a meeting like this. You guys were odd to me, okay? There's a series of events that came together that led me into politics. One of them was what I call the revolving door at the prison. As a police officer, I would arrest somebody for brutal child sex offenses, brutal child offenses. They would serve 3 years and they'd get out, and I would arrest them again. And that happened. That actually happened a couple times. And I was really kind of tired of the revolving door, and so I wanted to change that, but that wasn't enough to get me really involved in politics. I didn't know how to change it. I was just frustrated with it. Didn't know what one person could do. And it was about the same time I got a postcard in the mail. It's a postcard from a parental rights group, and I'm a strong advocate for parental rights, and you being the ones who dictate and decide how to raise your children. And it's one of those postcards that normally you just read and agree with and then just throw it away, but I decided with this postcard, for some reason I was compelled, and I called the number on the postcard. And I called them and I said, do you have a sign or anything I could put in my yard? And they said, well, no, we don't have a sign, but you can help us in other ways. And I said, okay, well, how can I help you? And she said, you can go to your caucus meeting and you can run as a delegate. Now, how many in here has been to their caucus meeting before? Yeah, it looks like most of you. How many are delegates? Was a delegate. Okay. 6 years ago, when I talked to this lady on the phone, was the first time I had ever heard those two words, delegate and caucus meeting. I had no idea what those were. I was just going, sure, I voted every November. That's what I did. I believed in voting, but I was not actively involved. I never went to a caucus meeting. And so I had her explain, well, what is this caucus meeting thing? She explained it to me. And so I could do that. I can go to a neighborhood meeting and run as a delegate. I could do that. And she said, well, where do you live? I said, well, I live right here in Harriman. And she perks up and she says, have you ever thought of running for the legislature? And I said, lady, you just explained to me what a delegate was. No, I've never thought of running for the legislature. I didn't even know what a caucus meeting was. And she said, well, would you? And I said, I don't think so. I don't think so. That's not for me. I'm not into politics. And she said, well, let's meet. So we held the phone. I turned to my wife, Sherry. I said, Sherry, I think they want me to run for the legislature. And she says, well, what does that mean? I said, I don't really know. I know that they make the laws that I enforce as a police officer. And that's it. So we met about a week later, me and this lady, and she convinced me that I should at the very least put my name on the ballot. And the reason being is, she explained to me that the legislator we had out in my area, she said he was the most liberal Republican in the state, that he always voted for tax increases, he always voted against tax cuts, and that he always voted for more regulation and disagreed with their issues. So I said, okay, I'll put my name on the ballot, but that's as far as it goes. So I went down to Salt Lake County Clerk's office and paid him my $15.80 or whatever it is. You know, that's all it costs to run for office. I don't know if you knew that or not. $15. And went down there and paid my $15.80, and they said, okay, you're a candidate. I said, wow, that's great. Okay. So I went home, and to be honest with you, I forgot about it because I never intended to run for office. I had no experience and no money, and I never knew another person who had ever been in public office, ever. I was just a blue-collar, middle-class worker like so many of you. The phone started ringing, though, and over the next few weeks, people started calling me and saying, well, who are you? And, you know, I said, I'm just a cop from Harriman. And they said, well, why are you running for office? I said, look, I'm not really running. I put my name out. I'm putting my name out there just out of protest of the status quo. And they said, well, okay, what's your platform? I said, well, I don't really have a platform. I'm not running. They said, well, what do you believe? And I said, well, that I can tell you. And I remember to this day telling people, I believe in the goodness of America. I believe this is the greatest country that has ever existed on the face of the earth. I believe that this country and our Constitution were divinely inspired, and that our founding fathers were select men raised up at that time to help direct and guide this country and this Constitution. I believe that anyone in this country can succeed. Anybody can succeed if government will just get out of the way, stop over-regulating, stop over-taxing, and allow them to succeed. I would tell them, I believe firmly in the right to life. I'm unapologetically pro-life, and I'm unapologetically in favor of the individual right to bear arms in the Second Amendment. And I said, I think the federal government's gotten too big, and that state government, is also too big. And people said, we want to help you. So for the next 2 weeks, my wife and I spent more time pondering and praying on our knees than we had other times in our life, and we decided we were in. Well, I didn't know how to campaign. So what did I do? I just did what I thought was natural. I worked hard. My father taught us, how to work hard and dedicate ourselves. And so I took my message to the people. I knocked on doors. I met with people just like this, in homes just like this, and brought my message to them. and I was elected. And it was amazing. I was elected and took office in 2007. And I have to tell you, with the exception of the day that I became a father, I've never had a more overwhelming feeling in my life. You know what it's like when you're a brand new parent, you hold that baby and you have to leave the hospital, you have to leave the security of the hospital, and you're like, how do I be a parent? Well, that overwhelming feeling was it was similar to the way I felt the day I was elected, because in one day, I went from being a flatfoot, that's what they call us patrolmen, just flatfoot. I went from being a patrolman, working as a police officer, to representing 70,000 people. And I had no idea how to do it. And it was an overwhelming feeling. But I dedicated myself and I worked hard. And I've been involved in some great pieces of legislation. I want to just highlight just a couple and then tell you a bit about what I want to do when I go to Congress. And then I want to answer your question. My first term in office, I accomplished the one goal I wanted to do, that I set out to do. I sponsored and passed the Jessica Lunsford Act, Jessica's Law. And what this bill did is it moved the penalties for child predators from 3 years in prison, which is what it was when I was a police officer, not a legislator, moved the penalties from 3 years in prison to a minimum mandatory 25 years to life in prison on a first offense, and life without parole on a second offense. And these are brutal child predator crimes. We went from being the softest on child predators to being the toughest on child predators in the entire country my first term in office. And I was very, very grateful for that. Two other pieces of legislation that I've just been fortunate to be involved with, and Cammie alluded to actually both of them. It's when I first met Senator Mike Lee, back when he was just Mike. He wasn't Senator Lee, he was just Mike. I'm the founder of an organization called the Patrick Henry Caucus. It's a state sovereignty organization, and it's actually spread out around the country now. And it was founded right here in Harriman, Utah, in my house. And we brought Mike Lee on as our legal advisor. He did it pro bono, and we brought him on to help us kind of direct some legislation. I worked with him on two major pieces of legislation. In 2009, Congress and President Obama were talking about passing what is called card check. I don't know if you've heard of card check, but what it is, it's the big labor union's dream bill. What it would allow them to do is come in and unionize your company without a private vote. Typically what happens now is they come in, they get signatures, and then it goes to a secret ballot, your employees vote, and if 50% plus one person decide they want to be union, they're union. This would do away with the secret ballot, and it would say, okay, if they get 50% of your employees to sign a card, you're now a union company. You've been taken over by the unions. And they wanted to do away with the secret ballot. So I ran a constitutional amendment to the state constitution that said all elections, including elections for employee representation, shall be by secret ballot. And it was a tough bill. The labor unions camped out up at the Capitol, but we passed it. And in 2010, November 2010, I'm sure you don't remember this, it was one of the things that you ratified. We passed it, and you had to ratify it because it was a constitutional amendment, and you did. It passed overwhelmingly, and now the right to a secret ballot is guaranteed in the state constitution. The other one that Cammie was talking about, the piece of legislation that I think I am probably most proud of, but I have to tell you it was a joint effort. It is the Obamacare opt-out bill. And I want to tell you, this thing, if you ever have started to lose faith that this country is divinely inspired, this story just boosts my faith a little bit, because it tells me, and it confirms for me, that the divine hand of providence is still at work in the affairs of men today. 2010, Congress was talking about passing Obamacare, and they hadn't done it yet. But I wanted to get ahead of the curve, so I drafted up a 3-page piece of legislation. 3 pages is all it was. That said two things. It said, if Congress passes a health care takeover, it will not be recognized in the state of Utah until the legislature's had a chance to approve it. And number 2, no citizen, it means none of you, will be required to purchase health care insurance or be considered a criminal by any government. Okay? It protected you from what they were talking about, the individual mandate with Obamacare.
that, and I'm grateful that he's here in my home today, and I'll turn the time now over to him.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm gonna box you up and take you with me everywhere.